Welcome. Today is July 29th, 2020. You are listening to Counterculture with Aaron Lujan. I will be covering the top news stories for Tuesday. Wednesday, July 29th, 2020. Thank you for joining me. Starting us off on today's broadcast is the Financial Survival Network. Election interference. Google purges Breitbart from search results. So we've been seeing this behavior especially accelerate in the last couple of days. I would say it's accelerated the last couple of weeks, but especially the last few days, coming off of the heels of a massive purge. Yesterday, all three Silicon Valley tech companies purged a mega viral video of doctors speaking out against the disinformation campaign that we know as the COVID-19 pandemic, scandemic. And this is just more fuel to the fire. Clearly, as we approach the election, there is a serious move for free speech to be stifled in the United States of America. Especially this newswars.com article, Twitter censors Trump by completely removing his tweet for first time. So 3 tweets were removed today, or I should say technically Tuesday, regarding hydroxychloroquine. I think I dated a girl in high school who was named that. They just called her Quinn. Just kidding. Trump was tweeting about the virtues of hydroxychloroquine, praising the doctors in the mega viral video yesterday at the steps of Washington. They were the White Coat Summit. Frontline Doctors was the name of the group. Bottom line, you guys, is this medication has been highly politicized. It's been FDA approved. It's been on the market for a number of years. It was a uber safe drug, fairly benign from the viewpoint of the medical community. And of course, now that everything's political, including a sneeze, we have to hyperventilate about how hydroxychloroquine is really bad. Well, I think that there's an agenda. I believe that the multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry doesn't want to leave anything untouched and has an intention to bring a vaccine to market and rake in multiples of billions of dollars. And if the public wakes up to the fact that this is not only a preventative measure but a cure, all bets are off for the pharmaceutical industry. So they will go as far as censoring the tweets of the President of the United States. WorldNet Daily has an article, Secret Documents Reveal How Tech Giants Crush Competitors. Congressman Pramila Jayapal said members of the House Judiciary Committee have seen documents that show Silicon Valley executives discussed ways to crush smaller competitors. The document in question illustrates a tactic called copy, acquire, and kill. We've seen that out in the open with Instagram. Anytime a competitor even dares to threaten the market position of the Silicon Valley giants, they are either copied, then they're acquired, and then they're killed. Personally, working in digital marketing and brushing up against some of these tech companies, I have heard personally of stories of companies that were headed for unicorn status. They were definitely going to be the next Facebook, if not bigger, but they were offered a ridiculous amount of money and shut up. There's actually a documentary called Who Killed the Electric Car if you want to understand a little bit about this tactic. Documents will be revealed Wednesday, according to the Washington Post, as part of a hearing regarding Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple's business models, whether they employ tactics that hurt competitors. Essentially, they're sidestepping federal competition laws, which we will learn about in Wednesday's report. Cernovich, the great Mike Cernovich, I think it's cernovich.com, obtained a secret memo from lawmaker Jim Jordan, which Cernovich calls a giant sellout of conservatives to big tech. The memo gives Republicans talking points that they need to defend the duopolies, the monopolies, whatever you want to call them, of Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. So in case the ways of Washington are new to you, one of the things that I've learned, again, I've never been in Washington, thank the Lord, but one of the things that I've learned as an amateur studying this from the outside is that politicians, lawmakers are briefed before they speak to cameras, before they vote, in order to move the agenda the way in which they want it to move. So in this instance, it's the decision's been made that Republicans and so-called conservatives need to be opposed to any sort of antitrust action against Silicon Valley, and it's evidenced in the fact that there was a secret memo that got leaked, and thank God for Mike Cernovich for telling us about it. Zero antitrust action is the soup du jour. It will be supported by the GOP, and the memo is loaded with talking points defending big tech's monopoly power. Quote, even if this hearing suggests that Google, Amazon, Apple, or Facebook have acted unlawfully, that would not necessarily mean underlying antitrust law needs an overhaul. So they're trying to cover their bases before they get to this. Once again, you guys, it's the reason why I'm not a Republican. Once again, the rhinos, the Republicans, have sold out their base. Once again, I'm going to ask registered Republicans, why the hell are you a registered Republican? Blexit, Lexit, there's the exit. Exit the door, stupid. Hashtag walk away. There needs to be a hashtag walk away movement from the Republican Party. WorldNet Daily is reporting Franklin Graham sounds alarm on urgent threat to America's future. Essentially, Franklin Graham, the son of the great evangelist Billy Graham, has been far more political than his father. And thankfully, we have Franklin Graham in our lives. He's got one of the largest conservative followings on Facebook, essentially stating that liberal socialist leaning leaders are destroying this country, and we need to go out and vote. We need to go out and pray. And I agree with everything Franklin Graham is saying. This warming up, this lying down to socialism in America in 2020, starting in the large cities, will be the beginning of the end for America. Similar article, WorldNet Daily, egregious. Dem mayors urge restriction of federal officers to quell riots. You guys, it's pretty obvious to me that the leaders of these large cities, these Democrat mayors, want their cities to crumble. They were put in this position as controlled opposition. They're not there for the interest of Portland or Seattle or Chicago or Albuquerque or Los Angeles. They are there to usher in absolute chaos, because out of chaos comes problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic. It's the old ancient geopolitical strategy to conquer and subdue a population. And right now we're in the chaos stage, and these mayors are there to let the anarchists rule. Democratic mayors wrote to Congress on Monday asking for limitations on the Trump administration's deployment of unidentified federal officers to their cities to calm protest, according to a letter posted on Twitter. Quote, this must stop. This administration's egregious use of federal force on cities over the objections of local authorities should never happen again, the letter read. Tom Wheeler of Portland, quote, I'm not going to try to quote him because I took the quote out of context, but let me put it back into context. The mayor of Portland is saying that federal officers are arresting Portlanders without cause, and they're interrupting protests for political purposes. So Mr. Wheeler, he's an actual mayor of a large city in America, is saying that the anarchists that have been setting federal courthouses on fire and have been burning the city and trying to destroy it for the last 2 months, or 56 days, I should say, is calling them protesters and saying that Trump's federal forces are interrupting their protests. Can you believe that? For political purposes, not to usher in law and order, but for political purposes. You know who has political purposes? Tom Wheeler has political purposes for standing down and allowing Portland to burn for almost 60 days. I don't know where we're at right now. The Democratic leadership, I say, is complicit in the revolution. They're taking their stand down orders. They're thwarting efforts to de-escalate the situation. When in their letter that was posted on Twitter, they're saying that the presence of federal officers is escalating the violence. Incredible. Incredible. I need to think of another word other than incredible and repeating it multiple times. My bad. Liberty Daily is reporting Democrats in Portland fine feds for trying to stop violent communist revolutionaries from overtaking federal courthouses. $500 a day. The city of Portland is fining the federal government for erecting a fence on city property to separate the arsonists, the anarchists, the looters, the communist revolutionaries from federal property. So the federal government is bad for erecting a fence. The anarchists and the arsonists are cutie pies, essentially. And the city commissioner, who I imagine is a far leftist, tweeted that we're now at $196,000 and we will collect. We will collect that money. So I just want everybody to remember this moment in history. I want everybody to remember the Democrat mayors standing down, them being complicit in the destruction of their cities, telling federal officers, do not take control of the anarchy in our cities. I want people to remember this because I'm going to remember this. My political memory is good, real good. Rip it, whip it, real good. Blacklisted news, Ron Paul, big holes in the COVID spike narrative. We're all being told COVID is spiking. There's so many cases. It's out of control. Due to all of these new cases and the rundowns of hospitals, we're gonna have to lock us down again and have mandatory masks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Ron Paul pointed out that the state of Washington revised their COVID-19 death count after attributing every single death that occurred in their state to COVID. Literally. I fell off of my bike and my head hit a fire hydrant. COVID-19. I accidentally shot myself in the garage. COVID-19. South Carolina, their spike was due to a delay in reporting. Houston, Texas, used April, May, and June COVID-19 death numbers and said sorry, it was a delay and reported it for their July numbers. Now, Florida had 100% and in some cases 98% positivity rates of a COVID-19 infection. Of course, that's impossible. Not every single person, that's the mathematical probability, obviously. And of course, they backed down and said, oh, it wasn't 98%. The homie was faded and he forgot the decimal point, is essentially what they said. It was 9.8%, not 98%. Hashtag my bad. That's a big my bad because you're scaring the hell out of an entire world population thinking they're going to die. It's not their bad. They're trying to get away with as much as they can so that they can usher in this new globalist agenda, and they're using this global pandemic as their Trojan horse. I'm going to repeat myself every night, and if you get tired of it, you don't have to listen. I'm going to repeat myself in the area of this is a globalist effort to subdue the population of the world to a globalist agenda, and they're using bioterrorism. Let's call them bioterrorists. They're jihadis on crazy level drugs. You thought Al-Qaeda was bad? You thought ISIS was bad? You haven't met the globalists. In fact, the globalists literally quarterback and control jihadi terror cells. I digress. The virus is real, but the government reaction is political and totalitarian, says the great Dr. Ron Paul. Yahoo's reporting a San Francisco couple held a secret wedding against city rules. Then they tested positive for the coronavirus. This isn't actually news in the sense of all of the other headlines I just repeated. This article, in different forms and variations, pop up in my feed multiple times a day, and it's always from mainstream media outlets. Party at Christian college, all mocked mask wearing and COVID-19, all died from COVID. There'll be another article. Girl goes to party after saying that she's a Trump supporter and thinks that COVID's a scam, dies hours later. You guys, media is a weapon, and it is in full auto mode right now. And if you are paying attention to mainstream media, you are being subjected to a relentless barrage of disinfo bullets to the point where your body is unrecognizable. This is like a mob movie. You just got beat with bats in the trunk in the movie Casino by Joe Pesci. I mean, this is like just constant disinformation and lies and psychological warfare against the American people using fear, because fear is powerful. It's a powerful weapon. But guess what? A lot of us aren't subject to fear. That's why I don't wear my mask. The Tennessean is reporting Governor Bill Lee, in-person learning is best option, calls for Tennessee schools to reopen. And this article made me think people are just going to move. They're going to move to states where they can actually go to work and their kids can get back to school. This is ridiculous. This is asinine. This is a little 9/11 in every single person's home. If the parents got to go to work and the kids are going crazy chasing each other with knives, that's literally an article that I read recently. It's not going to work, you guys. The USA Today is going to end this with good news, okay? USA Today, 2 schoolgirls in India discover asteroid near Mars. That's freaking awesome, you guys. That's the kind of news that I wish I could talk about every single day if we didn't have globalists at our freaking necks. You know, that's just rad. Do people still say rad? I don't know. Let's bring it back. Gateway Pundit, let me get my list here. Biden only takes questions from approved list of reporters at Delaware campaign event. Now, I got some really good highlights, I should say, from his press conference. He called it a climate crisis. The climate crisis. The campaign event started off awkward after Biden forgot where he was and welcomed people to the wrong community center. You guys, that's our choice again for 2020. If you thought 2016 was bad, we have a dementia patient running against a clown. Can I call him a clown? That's kind of how I look at him, like a clown. He makes my kids laugh. Zero Hedge. Red Bull and Goya Foods resist cultural warrior group. Let me reread that. Red Bull and Goya Foods resist cultural warrior groupthink, and sales are off the charts. Well, of course they are. Remember when, I guess the boycott of Goya is over because the conservatives had a boycott, and I was watching pictures of the grocery store saying due to the demand of Goya, limiting 2 per customer. Kind of like toilet paper was way back in February or March of this year. That's what Goya Foods is now. So the boycott didn't work. And this was a company that stood their ground. This was a company who was never political, lended their support to Michelle Obama, was very gracious to the president, said something that half of the country has said at some point in the last 4 years, which is, I support the president and we're blessed to have him. That obviously triggered the left into conniption fits, and it backfired on them, and now Goya Foods probably acquired a whole new market segment, and the leftists are going to forget they had a boycott way back in July of 2020, and they're going to go back to buying it because that's just the way it is. And Red Bull was also pressured, and apparently the guy that controls Red Bull is a billionaire in Austria and isn't hip to the woke culture, as the kids are calling it. I guess you're woke if you think boys can be women and all this stuff. There's craziness. So he's not down. He's not down with that. So he's like, nah, we're good. We're just going to reject this whole Black Lives Matter bull. And Red Bull is surging in sales. So, and then it reminds me of Dick's Sporting Goods. If you remember last year, I think it was during the El Paso shooting, since we all forgot about that, they politically postured and said, we're not going to sell firearms in our stores anymore because we stand with, whatever the political correctness was at that time regarding guns. Dick's Sporting Goods sales are in the toilet. And they've already closed locations, if I am not mistaken. Speaking of outrage culture, WorldNet Daily is reporting J.K. Rowling, transgender surgery for kids is a medical scandal. She said something very controversial, which is biological sex is real and has lived consequences. I actually agree with everything J.K. Rowling's saying. All that she's saying, the Harry Potter author, is what a second grader understood and every second grader agreed on before 1990. Like, boys have this, girls have that. That's not interchangeable. And there are certain attributes attributed to gender. There's only two. Okay? But apparently we all got woke, right? There's 32 genders. I'm not sophisticated or smart enough. I don't have enough Berkeley degrees to be able to wrap my mind around that. But your socialist college professor will enlighten you. And apparently in the United Kingdom, gender reassignment is a thing now. And J.K. Rowling is using her platform, God bless her, speaking against it, saying we're on the brink of a medical scandal, and pointed to a letter that she asked The Guardian to publish, which they refused to publish, from whistleblowers from this Gender Reassignment Institute in the UK. Quote, there is no such thing as male or female brain, and you cannot be born into the wrong body, says gender assignment therapists who were working at the therapist center. We don't need those people to tell us that, but the fact that they're on the inside of this genital mutilation campaign is what I would call it, and we have an internationally famous author speaking against it, just underlines and highlights these points. This is beyond child abuse, you guys. The BBC, Iran blasts dummy U.S. aircraft carrier with missiles. Speaking of war, The Guardian's reporting Americans warned not to plant mysterious seeds appearing in the mail. So apparently there's these mysterious packages coming from mainland China to different homes in the United States with these unmarked seeds. And when I read that article, I immediately thought, hashtag bioterrorism, hashtag China. We're at war with China. If you watch this podcast more than twice, if you listen to this podcast more than 2 or 3 times a week, you will hear me talk about the American-Chinese war. You're not going to hear about it in the mainstream media. I'm of the humble opinion that we're already at war. Cyber, financial, agricultural now. Moving along. Speaking of the Chinese war, Zero Hedge is reporting China. Sorry, I love saying that, you guys. China has quietly... My wife is sick of me saying it all the time. It's like, well, what do you want to eat tonight, babe? She's like, oh, you want to have some... Want to get like Chinese food? And I'll go, China. China has quietly cut dollar usage in cross-border trade by 20%. The percentage of payments and receipts denominated in yuan in total foreign exchange transactions by banks for their clients increased to 37% in June from 19% 2 years ago. So what does this mean in layman's terms? The Chinese government is no longer playing with US dollars. They are now moving away from the dollar and conducting business in their own currencies. And the fact that China is doing that has serious consequences to the United States because, as we know, the dollar is the petrodollar and it's the dollar of record globally. So the fact that the second largest superpower, soon to be first largest superpower, is backing away from the dollar, it could send our country into a financial crisis in a time that would make 2020 and everything that's happened blush. Financial, economic collapse. I know it's scary, but if you're listening to Counterculture, you want to know the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Variety is reporting Universal AMC Theaters forge historic deal allowing theatrical releases to debut on premium video on demand early. I wanted to share this article because we're starting to see media consumption change. We're starting to see institutional powers within the media landscape restructure and realign, which will have consequences on the culture. I'm 39, I grew up at a time when going to the movies was a national pastime. It's what you associated dating with, it's what you associated Christmas with, or a treat. You're like a 90s kid and it's summertime and your mom wants to take you and your brother out for something fun for the week. You'd go to the movies. Well, that's all now changing. Obviously, the theater experience has moved away due to COVID-19 concerns, and streaming is surging. It's actually surpassing traditional TV, has already surpassed it. I believe that theater going is going to die, and they're now attempting to cut the bleeding. If you read it, it read like a press release. I read in between the lines, and I believe that the economic conditions are going to force theaters to close, and they're now essentially saying we're going to release movies to streaming way sooner than we ever did before, probably days after the movies are released at the movie theater. But I think this is a death certificate for the movie theater experience. Good night, AMC. And then to close this out, let's see where we're at with time. I wouldn't know. Oh, good. 28 minutes. I'm doing good, you guys. Space Race shows for-profit competition brings best things in life. WorldNet Daily was reporting this article about how, if we remember, in the 60s, we were going to send a man to the moon. We did it. It was awesome. And then nothing really happened after that. Well, that's because NASA turned into like every other government agency. It became bloated. It became overfunded. It was no longer innovative. They were binded by the chains of government. And Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and other private entrepreneurs have proven once again that free market is the answer. Private business creates more opportunity, more innovation. It surges society forward. Elon Musk is rocking and rolling with the spacecrafts. I like that dude. I have my issues with Jeff Bezos, but the fact that him and Elon are competing in the space realm is awesome to watch. I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs, especially those who are taking us to space. So we had really good news today, and I'm really going to try to not make this a depressing podcast, even though we live in depressing, heavy times. So you can count on Counterculture to bring you good news, like schoolgirls in India discovering asteroids near Mars, and the free market winning and sending us actually into space, and brave people like J.K. Rowling speaking truth to power. You're going to get it here on Counterculture, because too much bad news is bad for the soul. So thank you for joining me, you guys. This was Counterculture with Aaron Lujan. This was episode 49, the biggest news stories of the day. Take care.